to be able to experiment with this at scale, standards and tools and capabilities. I think that emphasis needs to stand out more, because otherwise, this is covered very well. And the scalability aspect is perhaps not, if we look at the state part.
Really good comment. Now, am I off here?
All right.
Okay. So,
Take some questions.
we got a question? One,
Yeah.
two. Yeah, okay, we're going to go ahead and move the microphone up there.
Of course, there's a simple answer of how to get citizen input into these sorts of algorithm problems, which is to hide small, furry, colorful animals.
You're reading my mind.
Yes, but in general, the challenge approach, challenge or game approach is incredibly effective. It's disgusting. But do you have some ideas about what sort of challenges we could use to bring that sort of outside input into the, for example, processing and interpretation of data?
I mean, just all of the wasted annotators with Pokemon Go, right? Rabid 14-year-olds literally canvassing the planet looking for these little animated things. Couldn't they be annotating training data for me? Right? It's a lost opportunity.
There are platforms like Zooniverse that has at least 32 projects, and they look at the science of citizen science. So they look carefully about what engages volunteers, and they often find it's a press release, right? You get a pulse with the press, then it begins to drop off, and then another pulse. I caution a little bit about prizes and challenges, or those kind of incentives. You'll get people do the one-off. They'll do it for a little while until they've achieved it, and then they're done. Versus volunteers who are there for the public good, because they want to learn skills, because they like the social interaction, who will sustain longer.
That's where you might tap into what you're doing, right? Because you connect with the community. I think there's another question up there.
One sentence on this. I would love to see a computer science teacher decide to use the NOAA data in the cloud as the thing on which they work and do their projects.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up something that actually Jeff and actually Xiaolin made a point to say, and I agree with your assessment that you have to be careful about challenges, because I think there are additional dimensions to the things that we're talking about. There's a lot of dependency on what type of data that you're dealing with, or that you're talking about, as to whether these kinds of things can be effective. So here's an example. We had a challenge a while back where we have an interface to a lot of our imagery, to sort of like our browse imagery. Hey, find cool uses and to use the API to make some cool applications. Well, actually, the neatest thing that came out of it was somebody that found a way to spot cats in clouds. So I mean, this is. But the point is, but the point is though, you made a point that when we got involved with OSTP, you and I with USGeo and all this stuff in the Betty Day, the mandate that came down was, hey, we've got all this data. How do we make it more usable to people, for purposes other than that which it was intended? And that turns out to be a really hard problem, because the mandate that came down to us was just that, among other things, to make it more discoverable, accessible, and usable for other purposes. And we had to push back on that a little bit on the last bit, because whoa, okay, now you're diving into a realm of, that's a science problem. I mean, now you're getting into, how do you teach people to appropriately understand and use the data? And again, some data sets are relatively straightforward and easy to understand. Others, in the sciences and the earth sciences and physical sciences, can be a little bit more complex, and there's a lot of potential there for people to misuse these things, or to use them in ways where the answers or the conclusions they draw from them may be sort of errant. So, and it's like you said, Jeff, before, one of the issues that I think the government, both NASA and NOAA, have the challenges is that hand-holding involved. And you think, oh, we put all this stuff out there, all we've got to do is make it available, and people will flock and build all these great applications, but they can't do it because they spend most of their time trying to figure out what the hell am I looking at? I don't understand this data. And I think that in all of this big data space, we can solve all these kinds of technical bits, and how do we make great interfaces and great systems and processing systems, and how do we scale it out. But that last mile problem, I think, is one of the major challenges that we're going to have to address. And to me, in my mind, that's something really good that NSF could do, is You know, how do you bridge, how do you take it that last step to make it usable in a broader way, particularly for complex scientific data sets?
One thing I'd like to see happen, rather than just the crowd, is focusing on, say, the local governments, people who are, say, are at the city planner level. They have to deal with things like the possibility of climate change or the reality of climate change, let's just put it that way, and how much it's going to impact their city and whether they should, build here or forbid building there, that kind of thing. They don't want a bunch of numbers, they just want some answers. How can we help them and write the tools that let them get to those answers very,
How do
very
they
directly?
interpret the probabilities?
How do, yeah, right, because it's going to be a
How do I
probability,
do that
exactly.
information?
Exactly.
Another question here? You got it?
Thinking outside the box a little bit, if we're looking for, I guess, potential guinea pigs for crowdsourcing volunteers, why don't we look at the school systems? Getting one of the biggest gaps that we see across the world is education in spatial thinking, sort of linking sort of not just GIS, but just spatial thinking of how do we get from here to there, what is here, sort of where am I, how has this changed, so getting reaching out to the school systems may be a way to you get the Pokemon Go sort of hype, sort of the competition drive, but you've also got the ability to derive that more longer sort of ongoing sort of thing, even embedding some of these into curricula of having a sort of spatial challenge as part of school curricula that we can sort of in the OGC and sort of private and public sector agencies benefit from.
This is one of the things that some of the groups, the citizen science or crowdsourcing groups, have been struggling with. Often the immediate assumption is to go with students, and they can produce some really interesting results. Sometimes, though, the schools will focus and just do it for a week or 2-week module versus do it over the long term. So CocoRoss, for example, which is a rain, hail, precipitation monitoring that feeds into NOAA, they find they'd rather work with families. So you get the students, but not through the classroom.
Yeah.
Right, because that way the families will then do it regularly over the course of the whole year versus just in a module setting.
I think it's a great idea, and to your point, the actual delivery, or call it productization of what's being delivered is critical to getting that sort of reuse and engagement and that sort of thing, right? And there's a saying that says, build something people want, right? Like the worst case scenario is, not only is it a short-term thing, but it's here's your homework assignment, do it or you're in trouble, right? You want it to come from the student, that they want to do it, right? There's a book called Hooked, and it talks about building habit-forming products, right? Like, and this can be really dangerous because you're talking about screwing with people's psychology, and it can be used for bad things. Pokemon Go is probably a benign example. Facebook can get really bad. Like parents have neglected newborns, infants, and they've died because they've been in Farmville on Facebook. But if you look at the types of sort of psychology and internal stimulus reward type stuff, to get people almost habitually or as an addict to use your app, it's a great way to make $1 billion or potentially, engage an army of data collectors.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to be speaking something a little bit more positively. So we are working actively together as we are speaking here. There are multiple professional organizations and societies, including, for example, AAG, Association for American Geographers, and UCGIS, University Consortium for Geographic Information Science. So it's suggesting this proposal of including AP course for Geographic Information Science and Technology. So this would extend our higher education part into, high school system. the kids could be exposed to, this big data movement, because the workforce is a huge issue. The last mile problem, I think earlier the question asked, is a huge problem. That last mile is the blocker. And how do we resolve that last mile problem is the biggest challenge. And because you need different experts to work together, you need to tackle this scalability issue. And I think this education challenge you brought up is I think positively is where we should looking for solutions.
Great. We'll try this and see if it attacks me. Any more questions from the audience? So we've talked about a number of challenges. We've got some opportunities to enrich the base of complex data that lies underneath the testbed. We've definitely got a whole bunch of ideas on analytics and problems we can bring into the process, everything from data quality, uncertainty, fitness for use was discussed by Jeff. All those things relate, and as we get deeper and deeper into the big data success story, we're going to get deeper and deeper into how we appropriately use the information through that analytic process. We've got communities of interest that we can tap into that we've done before, but probably not as rigorously as we can in this upcoming testbed through activities such as yours and others that we've talked about. I really like the idea of engaging the volunteer communities, the ones that are lightly structured, that are going to be sticking with a problem, whether it's education, training kids on the aspects of climate and weather, and they're out there monitoring all the time, or whether it's communities that have a vested interest in their area and they're actually maintaining and sensing and recording that information for the goodness of the county or the local jurisdiction. I just think there's so much that we can do. What I'd like to do is to get back with all of you after the session, and maybe a call just to describe down some of these ideas a little further and bring them into the nest. And I actually asked all of you, if you haven't seen this website that George managed to lose, there's a picture of the architecture, but if you scroll down, all the individual requirements are listed. And just keep in mind, this is an ongoing discussion. Some of it will probably be real, some of it will fall off. But it's our attempt to try to get a very, very holistic view of what we're trying to do. And then that'll be whittled down over the next few months into a very detailed request for quotation that'll go out to industry and academia, NGOs, and others requesting participation to launch this forward. What I'd like to do is to make sure that as we build these requirements, we build the connections with the cooperating communities so that we can get that information staged, aligned up with use cases that make sense, particularly in the big data arena. So I want to thank all of you for your input and your contributions. Thanks to the audience for sticking with the process. And any last questions for our panel? George, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll go into the final session, which includes the rapporteurs, so if they could come
George,
down.
can we wait a second? Round of applause.
I think that this picture of wrapping up is not very clear. So wrapping up is not clear. So we're continuing on, or we're just moving on?
I have to say, you guys, it's a fine looking town. Yes, sir.
I have friends that I haven't seen in years. Covert relationship, not broadcast and covert ones. And I work with Ed Tuttle. He just moved out to Junior. Good people. Good teacher.
How you doing?
Charlie, nice to meet you.
My name is Lance McKee. I was senior staff writer for OBC when I was on our startup team. It just occurred to me that where you're working with some startups.
Oh, something more,
Probably a lot of the need and good writer, and I understand this OBC's business.
Look at that, I got your Joe.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
But there may be some that are reduced because the person in your position tries to provide resources of different kinds.
And so many of them are extremely technical and heads down and difficult to sort of communicate for a hopefully non-expert.
Right.
Think about that. Nice to meet you. Oh, thank you. I always try to use tender jokes. So what it is the end game.